Good morning. My name's Jonathan Norman, and I'm interviewing Martin Paver here, who is founder of an organization called Projecting Success, and also partner in a recent data trust that Projecting Success and Sir Robert McAlpine have set up together. So Martin, I have a number of questions for you on the subject of data trusts, so let's get started.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Jonathan.
Okay,
yeah, great, thank you.
Excellent. So let's start with the basics. Will you explain the concept of a data trust?
In terms of a data trust, what we're looking to do basically is to pool data, and it could be a risk data, schedule data, it could even be profit data as well. If we can pool that into these little filing cabinets, each of which is secure, we can then give access to a third party to start to share that data. If they can access that data securely with an NDA for a specific purpose, then what they can do is to start to extract some insights which we can't do independently. So it's making sure we've got the volume of data overall to start to feed these advanced data analytics approaches and artificial intelligence.
Great. So let's imagine I'm an organization with some data.
Yep.
How would I go about contributing data to a data trust? Are there things I need to do to prepare for that?
So what we're looking at doing at the moment is to mobilize this data trust and to start to get people involved in it. So we've got to set up a board of trustees, and we've got to make sure we can implement all these rule sets associated with it. So we're just mobilizing at the moment.
Okay.
Once it mobilizes, we've then got to look at the use cases that we're trying to resolve. So what are the problem statements across project delivery that we're looking to resolve? Once we understand that, we can then start to mine the data to put into the data trust. Some of that data is going to be held in people's SharePoint, and some of it needs to be mined. And rather than putting people in to do that, we can do that through something called robotic process automation. So we can get a robot to do it, or a Python script, something like that, that rips this data out, which means that the data is then consistent. So we can do that across various organizations. We start to lift up data quality. We start to do it at the same time every month. So the photographs of the data set will be exactly the same month by month. So through automation, we simplify the process.
Okay, so you talked about use cases. So that's basically, I need to have this information in order that I can make this decision. Is that the kind of?
Yeah, and I think in terms of those use cases, it's not thinking like a standard project manager or a standard project board member. It starts to think like a piece of artificial intelligence. So we could say, for instance, what's likely to trip us up in the next 3 to 6 months. That's something that you can't sort of forecast at the moment. We do it through risk assessments, but it's not really predictive and looking at that legacy data set. So it's a different sort of challenge, and we need to be asking different questions of that data.
Okay. I know that there are a number of perennial questions that come up when we start talking about data pooling. Commercial sensitivity, reputational risk, ownership, quality of data. Do you want to talk through some of those?
Those are all massive issues, and we've worked up the sort of rules and regulations of this data trust, and we recognise that if we don't put some controls in place, if we get data, it's going to be redacted, it's going to be the bland data, and it's all going to be anonymised. And that means that artificial intelligence won't really work because we can't get the connections between the data, because that's all been stripped out of the core data set. So what we need to do is to find a way of giving confidence and making the trust trustworthy. And in terms of making it trustworthy, we need to assess what the risk is of each of these data sets. And it's a balance then between giving somebody the raw data, because you can then get loads of insights from that data set, through to anonymization or pseudonymization. And pseudonymization is where we take the data and we take things out of it and replace it with numbers or letters, which we can then correlate afterwards. If we randomize the data, we totally anonymize it, we take that out. So there's different ways we can do it, and we've got to build up the trustworthiness with the data providers. So we'll start off with some data like health and safety data and snag data, which they're incentivized to share, and there's not too much sensitivity about it. And we'll start to get into the more and more sensitive data as time goes on, once we've demonstrated that this trust is working and protecting everybody's interests.
Right, excellent. And so if I imagine I think that's all good, and I've shared my data with you, would I then ask the trust or you for insights, or would I actually go into the data myself somehow and mine the shared data to get the insights?
In terms of the data trust, it's never going to be open source, because once it's open sourced, it's then got all the reputational information in there. So we can never open source this data trust. So it will be an application to the trustees and to the data steward to say, I would like to use the data for this use case. Now, if it's a competitor applying for that, then somebody might say, no, you can't see my data for that reason, because I think you're going to use it to develop something that's in direct competition with me. So you can't have my data on that aspect.
Right.
University, or it's a developer, for instance, is you might say, you can use my data for that specific use case, subject to certain constraints. And those constraints may be, if you develop a black box algorithm, you can't then reverse engineer the raw data.
Okay.
So there'll be some constraints with it, and we've written all that up in the overall guide to the data trust. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent.
It's a set of rules and manuals, basically.
So I guess it seems to me that there'll be kind of two sources of insight from this data. One is the kind of planned data analytics that you described, and the other might be the kind of insights that emerges from the automation that you apply to the data.
Yeah. So in terms of the data sets, what we'd like to do is to bring some of this to Project Hack. So it's a hackathon that we run 3 times a year. So we'll say to people, we think there's some insights to be gained from this data, and say to the community, just have a go at resolving that and trying to pull some insights to the data. We'll be working with universities as well. So we're talking to quite a few new universities at the moment and saying, can we plug them into the data? And that might be PhDs all the way through to a small project, for instance. And then we can say to the community, because we've got nearly 4,000 members across the community, is if you want to access this data, then let's have a conversation about it, and let's start to work with you to enable some of those innovations to materialize.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. So turning this over to you, what kind of questions would you encourage any organization to reflect on if they're considering taking part?
So the biggest question for me is, you've probably got this massive data set inside of your organization, and it's sat there at the moment and it's rotting. You're not really leveraging that data. So what can we do to start to extract some value of that exhaust plume of data which exists? And people say, and as various people said to me, in terms of that data set, I think it's got some intrinsic value, so I don't want to share it. But they're not exploiting that data themselves. And once we get to a point, especially if you're working with clients, and the client's saying, if you're delivering a project for me and you're not exploiting that data, I want to understand why not. We will then change the game. And I think that's where we're going with this, Jonathan, is this is game changing.
Yeah. And you make the point very clearly that data is has a best before date. And is very time sensitive. So you may sit on it because you feel it has value and you're anxious about sharing it or pooling it. But equally, it won't have that value for long. So you either use it or lose it, I guess.
Yes.